So this event is being sponsored by the Office of Civic and Community Engagement through a grant from the AAUW Honolulu branch in partnership with student parents at Mānoa, Read to Me International, After Schooling Better, and Seed Ideas. So before we get started, I wanted to do a land acknowledgement. So I'm going to share my screen. Can everybody see that? Hope so. Okay. So I would like to acknowledge that I am a settler on this Aina, working and as a student at the University of Hawaii at Mānoa, located in the Moku Kona and the Ahupua'a of Honolulu. I trace my family roots to Seoul, Korea. I would like to acknowledge that the Aina on which we would be gathering if we were in person is part of the larger territory recognized by Indigenous Hawaiians as their ancestral grandmother, Papau Hanau Moku. I recognize that Her Majesty Queen Liliuokalani yielded the Hawaiian Kingdom and these territories under duress and protest to the United States to avoid the bloodshed of her people. I further recognize that Hawaii remains an illegally occupied state of America. I recognize that each moment I am in Hawaii, she nourishes and gifts me with the opportunity to breathe her air, eat from her soils, drink from her waters, bathe in her sun, swim in her oceans, be kissed by her rains, and be embraced by her winds. I further recognize that generations of Indigenous Hawaiians and their knowledge systems shaped Hawaii in sustainable ways that allows me to enjoy these gifts today. For this, I am grateful, and as a guest, I seek to support the varied strategies that the indigenous peoples of Hawaii are using to protect their land and their communities. And I am committed to dedicating time and resources to working in solidarity. Mahalo. At this time, please feel free to use the chat to recognize where you're coming from or where you're currently seated. All right, so thank you again for joining us today for this Read Aloud event entitled Anti-Racist Parenting 301, Continuing the Journey to Becoming an Anti-Racist Parent. I will be moderating and presenting today's workshop, which is a third in a three-part series on anti-racist parenting. This time we'll be looking at the question, how to engage our kids about race using books. This workshop will have three components. Liane Akana will do a read aloud followed by guiding questions. Then I will highlight specific strategies provided by Read to Me International, Dr. Dana Tanigawa, and Adrian Esqueda from previous events. We will then end with a breakout room session to connect and share with each other. This is just an informal time to really emphasize that we don't do this work alone, we do it in community. So without further ado, Akana, who is a University of Hawaii program specialist in the Office of Civic and Community Engagement and former executive director of Read to Me International, which is a nonprofit childhood literacy organization based out of Honolulu, Hawaii, will be leading the group in a read aloud activity. Liane will be reading Skin Again by author Bell Hooks, demonstrating to parents and caregivers how to make books come alive while reading, and will present curated guiding questions to engage Keiki. Liane is the mother of 2 adult sons. So welcome, Liane. Thank you so much for being with us here today. Feel free to unmute yourself and share your screen.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Can you all see the cover of the book, Skin Again? I scanned the book so that you can all see the pictures and the words clearly because my camera wasn't picking up the image very well. So today we're reading Skin Again, and it's by Bell Hook, and it's illustrated by Chris Rashenka. Already I can tell just by the cover that I like the artwork. I think it's beautiful. The colors just pop out at you. And I did a little bit of research on Bell Hook. And I found out that Bell Hook is a pen name for Gloria Jean Watkins, who is a professor, a feminist, and a social activist who actually grew up in segregated Kentucky as a young child. And she uses, if you notice that the author uses small letters, lowercase letters for her name. And she, and in reading up about her, she uses that unconventional lowercase as a statement that what is most important is the substance of her books, and it's not who she is. So I thought that was very interesting because it kind of echoes with the theme of the book, Skin Again. So let's get started reading this. Skin Again by Bell Hook. The skin I'm in is just a covering. It cannot tell my story. The skin I'm in is just a covering. If you want to know who I am, you have got to come inside and open your heart way wide. The skin I'm in looks good to me. It will let you know one small again. The skin I'm in will always be just a covering. It cannot tell my story. If you want to know who I am, you have to come inside. Be with me inside the me of me, all made up of stories, past, present, past, future, and some true to life, and others all fun and fantasy, all the way I imagine me. You can find all about me coming close and letting go of who you might think I am. Before you come inside and let me be real, and you become real to me, all real then, in that place where skin again is one small way to see me, but not real enough to be all, the me of me or the you of you. For we are all inside made up of real history, real dreams, and all the stuff we hope for when we can be all real together on the inside. You guys like that? So a couple of things when you're talking with your children, it's important to know the age of your child and how much of an attention span they have. Obviously, younger children are not going to be able to hold their attention very long. So in those cases, when you're using this book with toddlers, I would go page by page and stop and talk about what's in the page. So if you look at this book, you'd want to talk about the artwork, point out some of the themes on the pages. Like if you notice here, there's a little snake that kind of appears different places in the book. There's an onion over here, right? And what else? There's like this onion looking thing where the heart is supposed to be. And you can probably have a conversation about what that might be and what it might represent. I noticed the illustrator uses primary colors. So if your child is learning about colors, you can point out, ask them to point out the different colors and the differences between this person there. So there's a brown person and there's a yellow person. And you can also point out the different styles of hair. I noticed that This person has curly hair on the top of his head, or his or her head, and this one has wavy hair. This person has no hair. So, you know, you can kind of talk about what's different and what's similar about the people in the pictures. And this is for, of course, the young people. So some of the talking points for an older child. Hold on. You can talk about the representations of the artwork in the book, and what they think it represents. I would have them start thinking about things, but you're the person who is going to guide the discussion. So you can ask them, what does the author mean by saying that the skin is just a covering? And why can skin alone not tell a person's story? So then you can also ask the child, so would you want somebody to make a judgment about you just based on your skin or what you look like? If so, why? If not, why not? And you know, talk about, is that a fair way to assess a person? What might you be missing by doing that and learning about a person? And then in the book, the author talks about the fact that she's made up of past, present, past, and future, and that she wants you to be inside of her so that you can explore that. And you can ask, how do you suppose you could be with her inside? How are you going to get to know the inside of her? And have a discussion about that. And how is it that we can be real together? That's another question. But these are all obviously for older children. For the younger children, these are some of the talking points that I would talk to your child about. Obviously, racism is a very complex and abstract concept for young children. And so you probably want to start by bringing up things that they're able to participate and latch on to. And so that is the artwork and the colors. And most young children will already know what heart represents. So you can talk about, you know, love and what's love, what does love mean to you, and why is that important, and how do you love other people, and why is it important for other people to feel that you love them. So those are some of the things that I would bring up in the discussion with this book. I think there's so many different things to go through. And I believe Susannah Kandikatti has prepared a 2-pager of different topics and questions that you can use when talking with your children. And obviously, because the age of the child will dictate what questions are appropriate, they have come up with quite a number of questions. Keep it simple, make it in a way that your child will understand and can get excited about. It's a beautiful book. I do like this book a lot. So have fun. Anybody have any questions about the Read Aloud experience?
So if there's no questions, I guess we'll move on. Thank you so much, Liane, for sharing. And you're right. Read to Me International provided guiding questions, a review of the book, and also some read aloud tips and strategies. So all of the material will be emailed after this event. So don't worry, you will get that. Yeah. Awesome. Thank you so much, Liane. So this next portion of the event I will share my screen now. All right. So I also wanted to share, as a parent myself, some of the things that I found useful from past workshops with Adrienne Esqueda, from the 2 workshops that she did with us earlier last year and this year. Also from Dr. Tanigawa, who spoke at a Read to Me International workshop, and from Read to Me International specifically. So these are things that I've been trying to do with my own daughter. And of course, she's really young. She's not 3 yet, but I hope to implement as my daughter shared in a follow-up email after. So don't worry about writing this information down. We'll get it. Yeah. So it's a kind of a mini presentation about some key points that you might want to look at. So again, I just want to put it out there. This material is not from me. It has been gathered by people who have thought long and hard about this topic. And I just want to acknowledge them and give them that credit. So Read to Me International, Dr. Dana Tanigawa, and Adrienne Hidalgo Esqueda. So the objectives of this presentation is to learn how to engage kids through reading books aloud together, with a focus on how to engage race-related topics. And also the breakout room session that will be part of this time to lean on community, to be encouraged and share stories with each other. So I wanted to start with an exercise. This exercise was adapted from a Read to Me International workshop. And I found that it was a great way to connect with my own experience with books, and to kind of situate myself in how I want to engage with my own daughter in doing read alouds. So think about your own experience with book read alouds. Can you remember them from your childhood, at home, in school? What did you enjoy? So I'm just going to give you a few seconds to kind of bring that to mind before we move forward. Okay, so I hope some great memories popped up. Okay, so I did want to go over some basics, just some basic read aloud strategies that you would want to know in order to do a read aloud. The Read to Me International resource list has a lot more strategies, but these are just the very foundational things that you need to do before you actually read aloud with your kids. So you have to pre-read the book. Yeah, that's really, really important, just to get a sense of what's being spoken about, and to think about what you want to engage with. So that's the next thing. Choose 1 or 2 things to engage with. It doesn't have to be a lot. You really can be very specific. This process, I think sometimes we get overwhelmed that we have to educate through books and we have to be a certain way, but it can be as simple as you want it to be. So really, it could just be one thing that you want to highlight in the book, and that. So as Liane showed us, she used her voice. She had high and low points. She slowed down. She moved a little faster. Her tone changed. So that's really important in keeping your kids engaged, and also in the process of wanting to maybe highlight certain things, or to give space for kids to maybe ponder about something that you read. So that's really important. Also to set up the environment for success. Are you in a noisy place? Maybe you want to try to find a quiet place. Maybe you want to make it a daily reading time together for 10 minutes with your kids. Make it exciting and special. That's really important to kind of to be intentional with this time with your kids. And you can definitely reread books. I'm sure everyone who has kids or has experience with kids knows that children want to read the same book over and over again. And so this is really great. And for race-related books, if you want to let your kids choose their books, I think a good strategy is to introduce the book and make it exciting to read and all of these, and kind of build up your library to have a few books that they can eventually choose from. That's been really helpful for us, so that my daughter can choose between a few, and so she still feels like she has that agency to choose what she wants to read. Yeah. All right. So these are just some basic read aloud strategies for the age range between 2 and 4. Liane definitely went over some of these things, so I'll just kind of go over them briefly. Find books that lend themselves to sounds, shapes, colors, early words. Have child repeat words that you read. Point and touch parts of the book relating to what you read. Ask child questions to get yes or no answers, pointing or oral responses. And talk with your child about what's happening to help explain. Ask them what they notice. So as Liane said, kids this age don't have a very long attention span, and they're really just trying to stay engaged somewhat. So in relation to race related books, what I found very key, and Adrian had presented this in past workshops, is this idea of naming, categorizing, and exposure. So for naming, to name skin color and racial categories. I have to be honest, growing up, we didn't really talk about skin color. So this is something that I've identify and to tell myself it's okay to talk about skin color. We have to actually. We need to mention these things. We need to highlight that people have different skin colors. And so don't be afraid. Do that. Name those skin colors, identify racial categories, introduce them to this, because if you don't, then they won't have the language for it. They won't know. We need to show our kids that we live in a diverse society from people all over the world. So we as parents and caregivers, it's really our job to show them this. And I think books are a great way to make this known. And so this goes into categorizing and labeling. Adrian had mentioned that this is when kids are really trying to categorize and label different items and objects. And so we want to introduce those proper ethnic and racial labels, label countries and cultures, name them, and really identify them. And then exposure, if possible, it's great to have cross-racial playgroups and friendships, but I know that not everybody is able to have that. And so I think that books are a great way to bring that exposure to maybe spaces that option is not available. So it's encouraged. It's one of probably the best ways to engage your kids, but acknowledging that that's not always the case. So really choosing books that you can educate with. So read aloud strategies between the ages of 5 to 8. So they're continuing to choose books with themes relating to helping, respect, empathy, race. Have child repeat what you read. Ask them, what do you think will happen next? Ask W questions, who, what, when, where, why, and make the text to text self-world connections. So I want to highlight this last point. Adrian had mentioned in a previous workshop that kids are trying to identify starting at this age, the impact of racism on society. So we need to define what racism is and share with our kids, what it actually means. So I just put the definition there from her workshop. And also this point that race is socially real, but not biologically real. So they're getting to an age where they can understand race a little more complex, in a more complex way. They're not fully there yet, but you can start to get a little more layers in there. And also this point of learning complex versions of history. I think this is really important as parents and caregivers to supplement what they might not be learning in school history books. And I think this really hit home because for me personally, I narrative of history in school, and I think I would have benefited if I got a different perspective, yeah, from an adult or a caregiver that was kind of aware of those things and sharing those things with me. So I think it is our job as parents and caregivers to recognize that there are different narratives and different views, and that history is not just one view, that we need to bring these things in, and books are a great way to bring these complex versions of history in. And then again, this exposure piece, if they can have cross-racial friendships, that's great. But if not, use those books. Yeah. Okay, so this slide is important because read alouds generally end at around age 8. So the focus group is like toddler to 8. But I know that some of our parents and caregivers have kids that are older than that. And so I did want to highlight and just give a few points about why reading aloud is still important after the age of 8, when you might not do these formal like read alouds in kind of cuddling up together and reading through a book and asking questions. And I got this great information from Adrienne Esqueda. She mentioned that there's this distinct transition between learning to read and reading to learn, which focuses on comprehension. So learning to read is the letter sounds, sounding out letters, forming words to sentences, sentences to paragraphs. And then as kids get older, they're reading material to learn. So that focus, the focus shifts to comprehension. But there is this false notion that if they can read it, they can understand it. That's not always the case. They might know how to say the words and string them together, but it doesn't necessarily mean that they're understanding what they're reading. So actually, older kids still benefit from this closeness of knowledge sharing, availability as a parent and caregiver, and this proximity interaction that you have with them. So I wanted to kind of give an example that Adrienne had mentioned to kind of drive it home. So as adults, when we're reading materials like that are having medical jargon, technical jargon, maybe an academic paper, we often deal with words that are unfamiliar and concepts that are unfamiliar. So on the first read, it might be the case that you don't comprehend what you read because you're just trying to decipher what the words are. So the same about complex new topics. So like racism, race, racial literacy, white supremacy, privilege, these are loaded, complex words and concepts. And so this supports that we need to still read with our kids, our older kids. So you can use children's books heavy in pictures so that you can discuss or assist in a reading aloud that deals with a little bit more complex material like textbooks or novels, or leveled readers that transition from less pictures to more words. Everybody has their own method. Everybody has their own way. There's not one kind of like book or one text that you must focus on. You can use different things that your kids are engaging with at that time. But really, the bottom line is to keep reading aloud to older kids, check for the comprehension, and ask meaningful questions, because they're trying to grapple with very, very complex concepts that even as adults, we're trying to figure out and we struggle with. So with that, I did want to now just go into breakout rooms and to share what you may have gained so far from this time together. What stood out to you? Are there strategies that you've already been using? Is there something that you want to implement? And I think that this part is really important because we shouldn't feel like we're alone in this journey. We do this together. We do this as a community. And honestly, I always learn from other parents who have older kids. And I benefit so much from just these very simple informal conversations. And so that's why this piece is really important to this process. So Sam is going to be creating breakout rooms now.
Okay, I'll start, and yeah. Susannah, should I pause now or the record
Yes,
now? Or...
we're gonna pause the recording. Okay, I think almost everyone is back. I hope you had a great time together, good conversations. We did. I think we could have talked for like another like 10 minutes or yeah, longer. So it was really great. So I'm just gonna share my screen again. Okay, so I did want to say again, just one more time, that all the resources will be emailed after this event. Do not worry, we will get those to you. And last but not least, a really, really huge thank you to Dr. Dana Tanigawa, Agent Hidalgo Esqueda, who's here with us today, and Read to Me International for all of this great information, for the guiding questions that they curated for Skin Again. So we're so grateful for these awesome resources and people who are doing amazing work. So we just want to acknowledge them. All right. So thank you so much for being with us here today. Thank you to everyone who contributed to make this event happen. And before we sign off, I really want to ask that you kindly take a couple of minutes to fill out our exit form for today's workshop. Sam has just put the link in the chat. In addition to the exit form questions for today's event, there will be an additional optional section that we request that you fill out. So we are actually sponsored through a grant by the American Association of University Women, Honolulu branch, and the AAUW Honolulu branch community is trying to conduct research and gather data on this important part of what they advocate for is for an equitable future for women. So I do have some questions specific to that topic. And each person that fills out that optional section will be entered to win a gift card. So an incentive, that's always nice. So I'm actually going to give a few minutes right now to fill out that exit form. I promise that it's really quick, really simple. You don't have to overthink it. But thank you for doing that. I think I'm going to give just one more minute. Thank you for your patience if you've already filled it out. All right. So one last big thank you for being with us here today, to everyone who contributed to making this event happen. Liane, our speaker, to the Office of Civic and Community Engagement, to our partners Angie and our team at SPAM, AAUW-UHM RIO, Carolyn and Dr. Tanigawa from Read to Me International, and Adrian Hidalgo Esquera of After Schooling Better. Thank you so much. Sam will be putting the contact information for each person into the chat if you have questions about membership or getting updates, or just some general questions or comments about today's event. And again, we will send that follow-up email, so please be on the lookout for the resources, and feel free, if somehow you don't get it, to email our AAUW email address. It should be going out by the end of this week. So I really hope that that reaches your mailbox. The recording will be available on our website, hopefully by next week, but I will keep you posted on that. And also Adrian Esquera is present with us here today, so I did want to leave a few minutes. If anybody has additional questions, she's happy to chat and stay a bit. So yeah, thank you everyone who joined. I really hope that you're able to implement some of these strategies and tools when you read with your keiki. And we will see you hopefully at our next event. Thank you.